They drove the Inuit Sled dog away. One night, his howl led them to their missing child. The cold wind whipped through the narrow alley between the snow-packed tents of Chikiktarjuak. Under a sky smudged with faint green auroras, young Ananak knelt beside his sled as the elders gathered. His loyal sled dog, Nuna, whined softly, tail sweeping the snow in anxious rhythms. Earlier that day, Nuna's paws had tripped the trader's precious sealskin bundle, and in their anger, the elders decreed that the dog must go. Ananak's heart pounded like an epukti drum. He had raised Nuna from a pup. She had pulled his sled through blinding blizzards and cornered foxes for their pelt. Now, shamed and sorrowful, he watched as Nuna was led by the harsh-eyed hunter Kealik beyond the ridge. Each step Nuna took faded into the wind, until only silence remained. That night, Ananak lay fitfully on his furs. He imagined Nuna crouched on the distant ice, shivering alone. A single thought thundered in his chest. The bond between boy and dog cannot be broken. Outside, the northern lights pulsed brighter, an ancient sign, his grandmother once said, that the spirits were stirring. As the frozen world held its breath, Ananak wondered, would Nuna's howl ever return? The morning sun barely pierced the heavy furs of Ananak's tent as he sat huddled beside the dormant fire. His parents moved silently, sharing worried glances above steaming bowls of fish broth. The absence of Nuna, once the heartbeat of their small home, left a hollow they could not fill. Ananak traced his fingers over the familiar grooves on Nuna's worn collar, now placed on the wooden rack. He remembered how the dog would nuzzle his hand before every journey, her warm breath misting the cold air. Now, only frost gathered where warmth once lingered. Outside, the howling wind carried messages from the frozen plains. Ananak pressed his ear to the tent wall. At first, nothing but the wind's mournful song. He closed his eyes, willing to hear a softer plea, a cry for help, or perhaps a promise of return. Instead, the stillness pressed in, as if the entire village held its breath alongside him. His mother's gentle voice broke the hush. "Ananak," she whispered, handing him a carved ivory whistle, for guidance. It bore ancient symbols of protection. She had worn it when she was lost as a child. "If you hear Nuna, blow this," she said, voice trembling. Trembling, Ananak placed the whistle to his lips. He sealed a silent vow. He would listen, and he would act. In that fragile calm, hope flickered like the dying embers of dawn. As the Arctic night deepened, a fierce storm rolled in from the sea, darkening the sky and unleashing a roar that rattled every bone. Ananak, clutching his ivory whistle, ventured into the swirling snow, guided by his grandmother's old tales of spirits that roamed with the wind. He knew he risked his life, but fear paled beside the thought of Nuna lost in the storm. Suddenly a glittering blink of light caught his eye, a faint glow dancing atop a nearby ice ridge. Ananak followed it, stumbling through drifts that rose like walls around him. Ahead, he glimpsed a small, quivering shape, a pup huddled beside a deep crevice. But as he approached, he realized it was not a pup at all, but his sister's fox, her eyes bright with panic. The fox darted away, leading him toward the unseen. A familiar howl cut through the wind, low and urgent. Ananak's heart soared. It was Nuna. He raced toward the sound, calling her name into the tempest. The howl answered, a ghostly echo that kept him moving. Every step was a battle, but the bond he shared with Nuna guided him onward. In the pale light of dawn, Ananak and his father set out to follow the trail left by Nuna. Each step in the crisp snow revealed paw prints mingled with small footprints, evidence that the dog and the child had traveled together. The horizon glowed with streaks of pink and orange, but the air remained sharp, each breath a plume of frost. Ananak's father paused to study a footprint pressed deep into the ice. "She was carrying something," he murmured, pointing to a slight irregularity in the print. Ananak knelt and ran a gloved finger along the groove. It matched the width of his small boots. Nuna had nudged him when he slipped, guiding and protecting him, a silent promise etched in the snow. As they moved westward across the frozen tundra, they encountered signs of wildlife, the curved horns of a caribou, a cluster of ptarmigan feathers. These markers, once harbingers of sustenance, now reminded them of their vulnerability. The vast emptiness stretched endlessly, and the wind whispered warnings of hidden crevices and thin ice. But every so often, a fresh paw print would glisten, and Ananak felt hope surge. He remembered his grandmother's stories of trackers reading the land as though it spoke in riddles. He closed his eyes, trying to feel the rhythm of the earth beneath his boots. When he opened them, he saw the prince led toward a ridge crowned with jagged ice formations. There, a narrow path wound into a labyrinth of towering spires. The entrance beckoned like a frozen cathedral. Ananak swallowed his fear, tightened his grip on his father's hand, and stepped inside. The world beyond the ridge was now beyond words. It was a test of trust between boy and dog against the cruel symphony of winter. After braving the labyrinth of ice spires, Ananak's breath came in ragged gasps as he and his father entered a low-ceilinged cavern carved by ancient glaciers. Drips of melting ice echoed like distant drums. There, curled protectively around a small bundle of furs, sat Nuna. Her golden eyes glowed with fierce loyalty, reflecting the pale light that filtered through cracks overhead. As Ananak hurried forward, the echoes of his footfalls awakened their missing child, who lay huddled against the icy wall. Ananak's little sister, Ikaluk, peered up at her brother with wide, relieved eyes. She reached out, trembling, and Nuna nuzzled her gently, offering warmth in the frozen hollow. Ananak's father knelt by Ikaluk, wrapping her in his parka. He scooped her into his arms, tears freezing on his cheeks. "She found you," he whispered, voice choked by emotion, nodding toward Nuna. Ananak knelt beside his dog. "You saved her," he murmured, stroking Nuna's thick fur. Suddenly, a distant rumble rolled through the cavern, thawing water releasing its grip on stone. Ice began to shift overhead, and jagged stalactites threatened to fall. Fearing collapse, Ananak grabbed Ikaluk and held her close, while his father gathered Nuna's collar. They pressed back through the narrow corridors, Nuna leading the way with steady determination. Each step was perilous. Loose ice threatened to send them tumbling, and the cavern's shadows loomed like watchful sentinels. But Nuna paused only once to ensure Ikaluk was safe, and her low growl warned of an unseen crack in the floor. Emerging back into the blinding daylight, the trio collapsed onto the snow. Ikaluk laughed between shivers as Nuna licked her cheeks. Ananak wrapped his arms around his sister and dog, feeling a bond stronger than any storm. In that moment, he knew the village would never again cast aside the guardian who howled through the night. Guided by Nuna's confident strides, Ananak and his family retraced their path across the frozen wasteland. The sky above was a pale wash of dawn's first light. The wind had calmed, leaving the snow hushed and gentle beneath their boots. Ananak walked between his parents, clutching Ikaluk's mittened hand, as Nuna led the way with her head held high. Each familiar landmark stirred hope. The bent driftwood that marked the old fishing hole, the frozen stream where they gathered fresh water. Nuna paused briefly at each, as if confirming their direction before trotting onward. Ananak marveled at her unwavering resolve, the same dog they had driven away now guiding them home. As the edges of the village appeared, smoke curled from the central fire pit. Elders and hunters emerged from their tents, alerted by the commotion. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd when they saw Ikaluk in her father's arms, with Nuna loyally at their side. The boy who had saved his sister returned as a hero, and the dog who had been cast out stood beside him unwavering. Ananak's mother lifted Ikaluk down and embraced her eldest son. The elders approached, reverent and contrite. Pausing before Nuna, the head elder bowed his weathered face. "You are our protector," he said in a voice laced with remorse. "Forgive us for our blindness." He offered Nuna a carved ivory medallion, the same symbols etched on Ananak's whistle. Nuna accepted the honor with a soft whine, pressing her muzzle into the elder's hand. In that moment, the bond between human and dog was renewed, stronger and more sacred than ever. Back in the heart of the village, the family gathered in the circular communal hut, where the shaman Amaja awaited by the carved drum. Smoke from sacred herbs curled through the air, carrying blessings across the assembled people. Nuna sat at the center, her presence calm and steady as if she already understood the ritual's importance. Amaja raised his drumstick and struck a slow, resonant beat. He began to chant in the old tongue, invoking the spirit guardians of the ice and wind. Each word wove a tapestry of healing, calling for unity between human and animal hearts. Ananak knelt before the drum with a bowl of purified water, offering it in solemn tribute for Nuna's bravery. As the chant reached its crescendo, Amaja dipped his fingers in the water and traced protective symbols across Ananak's forehead, his sister's, and lastly, Nuna's broad head. A hush fell over the crowd as ice-white snowflakes drifted through cracks in the roof, settling onto Nuna's fur like a gentle benediction. The head elder stepped forward, her voice trembling with humility. "We were blind to your worth," she said, eyes on Nuna's golden gaze. "Today we recognize you as family, equal in spirit and purpose." She placed a braided leather collar around Nuna's neck, decorated with beads and sinew. Moved by the ceremony, Ananak rose and addressed the elders, his voice clear and steady in the sacred hall. "Nuna showed us that love cannot be measured by mistakes," he said. "Her spirit reminds us that every creature deserves respect." The crowd murmured in agreement, tears reflecting the firelight. Ananak laid his hand gently on Nuna's head, feeling her warmth beneath the cool drift of snow. In that circle of drums and chants, forgiveness flowed freely, forging a promise that all living beings would stand together against the fiercest storms. That evening, the village erupted in song and dance. Torches lit the glimmering ice walls, casting golden patterns that moved like living visions. Families shared bowls of roasted seal and sweet muskox berries, and children laughed as they skated across a frozen pond. At the center of festivities, Ananak and Ikaluk held Nuna's paws gently, garlanding her with red lichen and white driftwood charms. The drum sang once more, and hunters performed a ceremonial dance mimicking Nuna's swift, protective steps. Elders told stories of ancient heroes, brave wolves, wise ravens, and loyal dogs who guided lost travelers. Each tale ended with a lesson on respect for all beings. Under the shimmering aurora borealis, the villagers raised their voices in a unified song of gratitude to the bonds that sustain life. Soon, Amaja invited everyone to the sacred circle by the frozen shore. There, he taught children how to shape snow into protective talismans and shared the legend of the first dog spirit, whose howl lit the night sky. As laughter and lessons blended, Ananak realized that through care, the entire community became guardians of each other. Nuna responded with a single triumphant howl, echoing across the frozen bay. It was a sound of acceptance, a promise of vigilance. The music swelled, and the crowd joined Nuna's melody, celebrating not only a rescue but the enduring care that connected every heart in the village. In the days that followed, life in Chichiktajuak found a new rhythm. Nuna no longer pulled the sled alone. She journeyed at the forefront, with Ananak guiding their path. Together, they taught the younger children how to read the whispers of the wind and the patterns of drifting snow. One morning, as a pale sun rose over an endless horizon, Ananak noticed Nuna pausing atop a frozen ridge. She lifted her muzzle and howled softly, a mournful tone that drew his gaze to distant shapes moving across the ice. Through the mist, Amaja's apprentice, Nanook, emerged with news. A traveler had lost her way near an outcrop to the east. Without hesitation, Ananak saddled the small sled, Ikaluk by his side, and placed the ivory whistle around Nuna's neck. The entire village watched as the trio set off toward the unknown, hearts tethered by trust. They carved a path through silent plains, guided by Nuna's sharp instincts. When they found the traveler, exhausted, her sled broken, they learned she was a merchant, carrying precious ivory tusks. She shivered in the cold, fear etched in her eyes. Ananak offered her warmth from his parka. Nuna lay beside her, sharing body heat like a guardian spirit. Ikaluk fetched water from a nearby spring, and together they repaired the broken runner with sinew and driftwood. When they arrived back at the village, the merchant bowed deeply, tears glinting in her eyes. "You have saved me," she whispered. "Your dog's howl led me to safety." Amaja nodded, affirming the invisible bond between worlds. "The spirit's watch never sleeps," he intoned. "Respect and care flow both ways." That night, as embers faded, villagers gathered by their tents reflecting on the lessons learned. Children pressed close to their elders, eyes wide with wonder at Nuna's courage. The howls of other dogs answered Nuna's distant call, signaling that the spirit of guardianship had spread beyond one bond to touch every heart beneath the northern sky. Months passed, and the memory of that fateful night settled into legend. Under the auroras, Ananak and Nuna raced across the ice as inseparable companions. Ikaluk chattered about new adventures, and the villagers greeted them with nods of respect. One twilight, a thick fog rolled in from the sea, swallowing familiar landmarks. Ananak hesitated, wind biting at his face. He raised the ivory whistle and blew, a single clear note that pierced the haze. Nuna leapt forward, nose to the ground, ears alert. They followed her lead until the fog parted, revealing a cluster of young hunters frozen in indecision. They had strayed from the pack, fearing the returning spirits of winter. Ananak guided them back, Nuna flanking their path with steady presence. Back home, around the fire's glow, Amaja spoke softly. The bond between our hearts and Nuna's spirit teaches us that hope endures beyond the storm. Each villager felt the truth of his words echo within. Later, as families settled into their furs for the long night, Ananak sat beside Nuna, running fingers through her thick coat. He whispered, "Thank you for never leaving me." In response, she nuzzled his shoulder, eyes gleaming with trust. Beyond the tents, the aurora painted the sky in waves of green and purple. Nuna howled again, a clarion call that stirred every soul. It rolled across the snow like a promise, carrying the spirit of care and collective trust. In that moment, every heart, human and animal alike, beat in harmony, united by a howl that would never fade. As you watch Nuna's howl ripple across the ice and remind us of the quiet power of trust and compassion between all living beings, take a moment to reflect on the bonds in your own life. What friendships have guided you through your darkest storms? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us learn from each other's stories. And if you believe in the magic of interspecies loyalty as much as we do, be sure to subscribe and join our community for more heartwarming adventures.